Have you ever wondered why most Shia Muslims today combine their prayers as a norm, Dhuhr with ʿAsr, Maghrib with ʿIsha, and yet if you actually look into the sources, it seems like this was supposed to be the exception, not the rule? Today we're going to talk about the confusion surrounding Shia prayer times, why it exists, how it came about, and what the Holy Prophet and the Imams themselves actually taught and practiced. Let's start with what is undisputed in Islam. The Holy Prophet prayed 5 times a day at 5 distinct times. Combining was allowed, but clearly as a concession for travel, weather, or sometimes without excuse, but never as the default. Imam Ali, as recorded in Nahj al-Balagha, explicitly describes 5 specific times for the daily prayers. We then see Imam Zayn al-Abidin ordering the children to combine Maghrib and ʿIsha so they wouldn't miss ʿIsha, saying, "This is better than them sleeping on it." This is an interesting narration. It appears that the 4th Imam would give a significant gap between the Maghrib and ʿIsha prayers, so much so that the children in the household would struggle to stay up for ʿIsha. The Imam specifically told the kids to combine the 2 prayers so they would not miss the ʿIsha prayer. This shows how the al-Bayt would use the concession of combining the prayers to uphold the institution of prayer while easing the task for the weak ones among the community. There is a report from Imam al-Baqir where he mentions that the time for the ʿAsr prayer on Fridays is the same as the time for Dhuhr prayers on other days. This shows that ʿAsr prayer has a specific time distinct from Dhuhr, though Friday is an exception where the ʿAsr prayer is to be prayed immediately after Salat al-Jumu'ah. In a narration from al-Imam al-Saduq, we see him mention that the Prophet would combine his prayers while traveling or in a hurry, and then he adds that separating the 2 is better. The chain of transmission for this narration is considered weak, but nonetheless, it is a report that explicitly lists separating the prayers as the preferred practice. We find several other narrations where the times of Dhuhr and ʿAsr are distinguished by the lengths of shadows in the Maghrib, and ʿIsha prayer times are specified in terms of sun setting, disk of sun disappearing, and the fading of redness on the horizon. In addition to these narrations, we also find reports where the Imam would explicitly lump the times of Dhuhr ʿAsr and Maghrib ʿIsha. For example, in one such report from Imam al-Baqir, we find, when the sun declines from its zenith, the times for both Dhuhr and ʿAsr prayers begin. When the sun sets, the times for both Maghrib and ʿIsha prayers begin. It is worth pausing to consider the situation of the Shia in the aftermath of Karbala and the generations that followed. To begin with, Shia doctrine, rituals, and practices were still in flux. What we now call 12er Shiaism had not yet crystallized into a clearly defined system. The followers of the Imams existed in small pockets, often holding diverse beliefs, views, and opinions. On top of this, the Shia lived under persistent fear, persecution, and bias. The later Imams themselves endured constant surveillance, periods of house arrest, and even imprisonment. In such an environment, the community lacked a strong public identity or institutional presence. Under these circumstances, it is plausible that the Imams encouraged their followers to make use of the concession of combining prayers. This would have provided relief in difficult conditions while still ensuring that the core obligation of ṣalāh was preserved. It is also easy to see why the Shia would have embraced this opportunity wholeheartedly. As Dr. Nagam Haider explains in The Origins of the Shia, Identity, Ritual, and Sacred Space in 8th century Kufa, the method of prayer itself had become a primary marker distinguishing the Shia from the non-Shia. Given this significance in the need for communal cohesion, it is not surprising that combining prayers could evolve into a defining feature of Shia identity. al-Faqih, essentially a fiqh manual compiled by Shaykh al-Saduq, who was born about 45 years into the minor occultation, presents narrations as textual guidance that allows both combining and separating the prayers. His student, Shaykh al-Mufid, systematized this further in his al-Muqni'ah. There he affirms 5 adhans, gives a single entry point for both al-Dhuhr and al-Asr, yet specifies distinct times for al-Maghrib and al-Isha. The fact that al-Mufid does not mention the optimum time for al-Asr prayer is telling. It suggests that, early into the major occultation, Shia scholarship was already normalizing and codifying the practice of combining prayers. What had begun as a concession in the time of the Imams was gradually being formalized into juristic manuals. This trend has continued in different ways. Today, in most, if not all Shia mosques, the adhan is given 3 times a day, and congregants gather at those 3 times. For many, this feels normal. But here's the problem. Most Shia are completely unaware of the merit associated with praying in the waqt al-faḍīlah, the optimum times of each prayer. Yes, jurists do mention these faḍīlah times in theory, but almost no effort is made to make this well known or to shift the trend in mosques and communities. The most shocking part is this. If a layman picks up Sayyid Sistani's Risala in English, Urdu, or Farsi, they will find no guidance at all on the optimum times for al-Asr and al-Isha prayers. Perhaps there are some translations that do contain this info, but we have not been able to find one. Ask an average scholar, and the conversation usually begins and ends with a robust defense of combining. They may even encourage you to continue combining. If you press further and ask about specific times, they often resign and say, just follow Sunni times. But that raises a question. Which Sunni times? The 4 Sunni schools differ in their definition of prayer times, especially for ʿAsr and ʿIsha. Which one should a Shia follow? And why? To complicate matters, most Shia timetables don't even list the times for al-Asr and al-Isha prayers. The few that do often appear to copy directly from Sunni charts without explanation. And yet, when you open Sayyid Sistani's Arabic Risala, Minhaj al-Salihin, the guidance is explicit. He lays out in detail the times for each prayer, including al-Asr and al-Isha, and makes clear that separating the prayers is preferred. A quick Google search in Arabic even leads to Sistani's official Q&A page, where the time for al-Asr is given as approximately an hour and a half after Dhuhr. This matches Sistani's fatwa and is often about 2 hours earlier than the commonly accessible Sunni times. That is, the ones from which the Shia timetables seem to copy from. Beyond that, there is no shortage of Arabic language content online. Articles, lectures, even videos of scholars explaining the faḍīlah times and emphasizing separation. But in other languages, such material is rare, and that's no small issue, given that up to 80% of the Shia world is non-Arab. The fact that translations fail to include this vital information and that many scholars either neglect or are unable to pass it on is deeply concerning. Ṣalāh, according to the Prophet and the Imams, is a pillar of faith. Something as basic as the optimum times of prayer should be firmly established and widely known. In our opinion, from a system-level perspective, this failure stems from short-term memory and not taking a holistic view of the Imams' teachings, where we have forgotten the methods of the Prophet and the early Imams, which clearly favored separation, and instead treat combining as the norm. Over-seeking comfort and ease also plays a role. We may not go so far as to call this an abuse of the system, but turning the less favorable option into a habit, and even insisting upon it, can hold back both the spiritual and intellectual growth of individuals, communities, as well as the entire Muslim Ummah. And lastly, polemics certainly have a major role to play. Combining prayers has come to act as a differentiating badge from Sunnis. Sectarian ego often takes precedence over the true essence of faith. Individual scholars could do more to highlight this guidance clearly, ensuring that what is set out in fiqh works actually reaches the community in practice. Seminaries, too, would benefit from giving greater attention to foundational issues like prayer times, so that clarity filters down to everyday believers. Today, however, many Shia communities remain largely unaware of the optimum times of prayer, and the concession has quietly become the common practice. So what is the way forward? We need to be pragmatic. In this day and age, over-reliance on translated texts and on scholars to do all the thinking can severely limit one's understanding, even of the most basic aspects of religion. We should be humble in our search for truth, but not at the expense of insight. Humility means being open to learn from any source. Insight means developing the ability to challenge any source. The balance we need to recover is to keep both strands alive, but to actively give preference to separation, as individuals, as communities, and in our mosques. If you found this reflection insightful, we encourage you to share it with others who might benefit from the discussion. Thank you for watching.